Hey guys, Sean here. So something big is happening. Saudi Arabia is currently considering selling their oil for the Chinese yuan. Now this comes as no surprise as the world is watching the United States hit Russia with multiple sanctions. This includes freezing their assets, cutting away their access to US dollars, and banning imports of Russian oil. Now, the United States has effectively weaponized the dollar as a tool for punishment, and many countries have begun thinking that it might be good to diversify their holdings and use other currencies to do business. Now, this is really a classic I told you so moment, as the sanctions are now starting to backfire. Now, if China and Saudi manages to pull this off, this could be the first domino that could threaten the dollar's place as the world's reserve currency. This means that anything priced in dollars will become more expensive, the stock market might collapse, and a lot of people will become a whole lot poorer. Now, the petrodollar was born in the 1970s and it was an arrangement by the United States and Saudi Arabia to standardize their oil sales in dollars. That means if you're China, Australia, or Turkey, you need US dollars in order to buy oil from Saudi Arabia or OPEC at large. Now, this arrangement was mutually beneficial for the United States. The petrodollar forces the world to get dollars in order to buy oil, while the Saudis gain security guarantees from the United States to protect their kingdom from a hostile region. Now, because of the petrodollar, the United States had the power to rapidly grow as it could continuously borrow from the world as it was the world's reserve currency, and every nation kind of needed dollars to trade, right? However, because of the sanctions going on, now the world today is really thinking, I don't want to have all my eggs in one basket and lose access to it if one day the United States says so. And it's really no surprise that we are now seeing China beginning talks with the Saudis to buy their oil with the Chinese yuan. Now, if this goes through, it will set a precedence for the world to start de-dollarizing from the dollar and move away to another currency like the yuan. And if a new world currency emerges from this, I believe holders of specifically gold will be the winners. The world already has been slowly de-dollarizing and reducing the amount of US dollars they hold as reserves. Ever since 2015, the US dollar has been declining from around 65% to 59% of the world's reserve currency of choice. And the interesting thing to note is that as the US dollar gets thrown out of the reserves, guess which currency is gaining in prominence as a reserve currency? The Chinese yuan. Now, while I don't think this one event will cause the end of the dollar's reserve status, this is one more straw on the camel's back that will cause the eventual collapse. Right now, the world isn't very happy with the way the US dollar is being handled. We are seeing an inflation rate of around 7.9% back in America, which essentially means that their reserves are losing value as well with each passing year. Plus, the United States debt has smashed past $30 trillion, making it more uncertain if they can really pay back their obligations or if a default is possible down the road. Now, when you add in the recent sanction powers to cut off a country's reserve holdings and restrict transactions in US dollars, this adds an extra incentive for countries to slowly abandon the US dollar. Now, the Chinese long have been planning to increase the yuan's prominence as a world reserve currency. Since 2016, the IMF recognized the Chinese yuan as an alternative reserve asset to the dollar, and China has been taking steps to get the world to really use their currency. And this includes setting up their own Shanghai Futures Exchange that allows the trading of commodities. We are talking about crude oil, base metals, and most importantly, gold. And this actually challenges the dominance of the US dollar, and its significance is growing, right? Just in June 2020, around 10% of the world's crude oil was traded in the Chinese yuan. And now, if China manages to buy oil from the Saudi Arabians, this is now additional utility for the Chinese yuan. Central banks can now justify their decision to diversify away from the dollar to the yuan. After all, they can now use the yuan to buy oil from the Middle East if they so choose to. And it's all these little events that are slowly chipping away at the US dollar's dominance. The dollar didn't become the reserve currency overnight, and it will take years, if not decades, to slowly replace it. Even Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, has come out to say that there might be a day when there could be more currencies coming out as part of the world reserve currency. Now, in order for the yuan to be taken seriously, it has to prove to the world that they won't be fiscally irresponsible and that their currency has value and will hold value, or at least, be more responsible than the US dollar. So we know that no currency today is backed by anything other than trust. Now, China is the world's second biggest economy and is really steadily catching up with the United States. That is important to show that behind the yuan is a productive economy, but what is equally as important is the gold reserves that China has. Now, the more gold a country has, the more independent wealth they have, which isn't another country's liability, right? Unlike currencies. And this is becoming extremely important today, especially when China is the biggest trading partner of the United States as well as a rival, right? Now, China's gold reserves is officially listed as 1,948 tons of gold, and on the surface that seems to be much lower than what the United States has, which is over 8,100 tons. But if we look at China's domestic gold production since 2000, which shows over 6,000 tons being mined, and if we add in the gold imports through the China Gold Exchange, we can see over 20,000 tons has been withdrawn over the years. Now, how much of those inflows into China's reserves, we won't really know. In fact, China is currently the world's largest producer of gold next to Russia, and that means if China ever gets sanctioned or blocked from trading in the gold market, they can just buy their own domestic gold or trade with Russia, right? While this doesn't directly mean that the yuan will become gold backed, it does show that there is something of tangible value sitting in China's vaults that is truly independent and can't be debased. Now let's talk a bit about the Saudis, right? You might be wondering, why would Saudi Arabia consider selling their oil in yuan? Now this comes on the backdrop of Biden begging the Saudis to pump more oil and Saudi Arabia just ignoring him, right? Yeah, and it's quite simple. Over the recent years, Saudi has been straying further and further away from the United States, and with the recent events in Ukraine, the Saudis are probably questioning both the wisdom of holding too many dollars and if the US can truly protect their kingdom. Now, China buys more than 25% of oil that Saudi Arabia exports, and if all this is suddenly priced in yuan, China now has effectively created their own petrol yuan, right? So where does this leave us, people like you and me? I think if this goes through, prices of things, especially in America, might shoot through the roof, especially if the world uses this as a catalyst or excuse to slowly start de-dollarizing, right? Countries could either buy more Chinese yuan as an alternative because at least they could get oil from Saudi Arabia with it, and this provides them with extra security if they suddenly get cut away from the US dollar, or the dollar just loses more value thanks to inflation. And I believe this is even more serious than what Russia could do financially to the United States and really lays the groundwork for a new reserve currency. Now, I'm not saying to run and buy the Chinese yuan, but it is really important to keep an eye out on this, right? Because if this yuan for oil goes through and China wants to make a serious bid for the status of the world's reserve currency, it is likely they will have to meaningfully surpass the US gold reserves and start buying more precious metals to build more trust, right? I believe the great diversification has truly started and cracks in the dollar are showing, and it seems that China is now trying their luck and gauging how much trust the world still has with the US dollar. So I think we are closer to a recession than we think. Inflation is at an all-time high, and now China is poking at the US dollar. And each of this on its own is enough to trigger a crash, but it has been over 13 years since the last recession back in 2008. Now, this de-dollarization can happen very fast, and traditionally it would be to a neutral asset like gold. But if China manages to pull this off, and if it reaches a tipping point, it could really accelerate nations moving away from the dollar in a flash. So keep an eye out on this. In such a time, getting hard assets might be a good idea. So let me know what you think. Do you think the Saudis will really sell their oil for yuan, or is this just a scare tactic from China? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's video, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe for more gold, silver and finance videos. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon.